Good day, folks, and welcome to Quarry Side Chat, where we interview Freemasons and discuss topics about the past, present, and future of Freemasonry in the 21st century. As a reminder, the thoughts and ideas are represented by the participants are their own ideas and thoughts, and not the statements or opinions of any Grand Lodge. Please keep your conversation open to the public and on the level. Today, I'd like to present an exemplary Freemason, a brilliant scholar, philanthropist with a magnificent character, with truly magnetic charisma. After vast amounts of years in Freemasonry and an extensive involvement in charity, who has given countless power-packed lectures with superb detail and finesse, ranging from the esoteric and occult to the artistic and musical history of Freemasonry. A true connoisseur and artisan of knowledge, vintage cars and stamps, just to name a few of the radiant interests with countless other intrigues. But who is this exceptional brother? And what winds guided him on his journey of knowledge and self-discovery? Today, we are on the level and an in-depth interview with Right Worshipful Brother Bharat V. Epur and his magnificent journey through Freemasonry. In our last episode, we had lectures on Freemasonry in many forms. But who is a Freemason and what is that personal journey like? And how do we walk upon the tessellata of life? Right Worshipful Brother Bharat V. Epur, OSM. He is from the Lodge of Srinivas Gopal, number 190, Chennai. This is his mother lodge, which he joined in 1998 and also became the master of in 2005. He's the recipient of the Order of Service to Masonry, OSM. He holds the rank of past Deputy Grand Master and was the past Regional Grand Master of the Regional Grand Lodge of Eastern India. One of the very few brothers whom we know that holds the rank of past Deputy Regional Grand Master rank in all regions of India. He is a member in many orders, including the Holy Royal Ark Chapter, Mark Masonry, Royal Ark Mariners, Supreme Council of 33 of the Ancient and Accepted Rite, Royal and Selected Masters, Allied Master's Degree, Order of Secret Monitor, the Order of the Scarlet Cord, and the Operatives, the Masonic Order of Athelstan, and the Order of Knight Masons, August Order of Light Pilgrims, Preceptors, just to name a few. To name a few of his vast experience, Right Worshipful Brother has dedicated to join and to kindle the fire and revitalize many of these countless lodges, while also being a founder of most of these lodges, creating a new life and giving a new flame to these different earlier orders that could have been lost in the past. One cannot even begin to quantify the time and personal dedication that he has imparted in order to keep the flame of Freemasonry bright and burning. And with that warm welcome, I would like to present Right Worshipful Brother Bharat Epur. It is our honor to have you on Quarry Side Chat.
Thank you, Brother Richard Mehta, for that glorious introduction. I don't know if I merit all those nice encomiums you showered on me, but I thank you all the same. And it's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon and also with the members of your team, Quarry Side Chats, to chat a little bit about our mutual Masonic journey. As you rightly said, it's been a glorious journey as far as I'm concerned. Of course, not everything was rosy, but then nothing in life is all rosy. One needs to deal with the challenges that kind of creep up upon you. Sometimes they leap upon you. But I guess we become the better for it, the tougher for it. So now we are here together, and let's have a conversation.
Thank you so much, sir. How, maybe start with the first question. How were you introduced into Freemasonry, sir? And why did you join? And what was the passion behind this introduction for you? And where did this journey start?
First of all, let me make it very clear that I'm the first and only Mason in my immediate family. And I had no knowledge of Masonry till about 91, 92. And that is when I had gone after my undergraduate study at IIT Madras. I'd gone off to America for my further studies, and I was working there. And I was there for about a period of 11 years continuously. And I came back to India for the first time after my going away in 1989. I came back to India primarily to meet my parents and my brother and his family. And in the process, got engaged to my wife-to-be. And we had a mutual understanding, my wife and I, that I would not continue my life in America because I was keen to return to India. And more importantly, I was keen that our children, if they were to come up out in due course of time, would rather be brought up in an Indian environment rather than in a foreign environment. And my wife shared that same philosophy. So after we met, got engaged in 89, I returned to America, wound up my affairs there, and then came back to India in 90 to get married. And I settled down in Madras. It was then Madras, it became Chennai later. And I joined my father-in-law's business. He was involved in manufacturing, trading, and services. So I got involved in his businesses. And ever since then, I've been in Madras, Chennai. So about 3 years after that, a very dear friend of ours, a family friend of ours who was had retired as chief general manager of ICICI. At that time, it was ICICI, it was not a bank. So he suddenly called me up one day and he said, Bharat, I want you to join something. I said, what is it? I used to call him uncle. I said, what is it, uncle? What is it you want? So he said, no, there's something called freemasonry. I would like to join that. I said, thank you for the offer. I don't know anything about it. And more important, I'm just setting up my businesses, so I don't wish to be distracted at this point in time. But when I'm ready, I shall certainly ask you again after some time. So that was the end of that particular conversation. Several years passed by, and then suddenly out of the blue, one of my close friends, who's now Right Worshipper Sushil Balla, we've been family friends, his wife and his wife's parents and my parents have been friends for going back to the 1950s. So suddenly he called me up and said, Bharat, I'm inviting you and your wife for a party tonight. I said, okay. I didn't, nothing to do with Freemasonry. I had no idea, but I'd forgotten about Freemasonry by then. So my wife and I went to this. It was a ladies' night of Srinivasa Gopala Lodge. So we got introduced to the members of the lodge, and then we got introduced to the concept of Freemasonry. And I found it rather intriguing. So I agreed to join the lodge. And then I called up my very good friend and guide, who's now no more, unfortunately, Worshipper Subantor Vasudev. So I called him and I said, Uncle, I've been asked to join this lodge. Is it okay with you? He said, yeah, as long as you join Freemasonry, it doesn't matter which lodge it is. So that's how I ended up becoming a Mason. And here we are, 22 years later. So glad I made that decision. I could have probably been a Mason in 92 if I had not been hesitant about it. And I was hesitant not because I didn't like Masonry or anything. I knew nothing about it. But it was just a question of my particular peculiar circumstance at that time. It was not possible for me to get distracted. That's
so you are very happy you joined Masonry.
Yes, it was been a good ride so far. And much later on, after a few years in Masonry, I realized that in India, we have these artificial construct of a Grand Lodge of India and the parent Grand Lodges all functioning together, but not quite together. So if I had accepted my first invitation, I would have been a member of the English Constitution, because that particular lodge was the Lodge of Perfect Unanimity, number 150, the oldest lodge in Madras. It was a very historic lodge. In fact, I mentioned that in one of my speeches about the origins of Masonry in India. So I would have been a member of that lodge and not of Srinivasa Gopala. So probably my trajectory would have been different, and I would not have been where I am today if I had taken that step. So these are things which one doesn't foresee, one cannot predict, and you just take it as it comes, make the best of it.
Sort of the destiny that you handed. Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
What brought about your intrigue to join all these other allied orders? I mean, you have such a vast profile. I mean, you've taken it to a level where your knowledge and your understanding of these different orders has become more than anyone can even fathom. How do you explain that?
Uh, well, to put it in a nutshell, what happened was after I was initiated in Srinivasa Gopala, um, at the festive board, they have the usual toast before the meal. So the toast that evening, and being since I was initiated, there was a toast to the newly initiated brother. That was myself, and my proposer, who was at that time senior warden of the lodge. So he proposed a toast to me, and then I had to give my response to that. So quite innocently, I asked the brethren, after the usual niceties were over, I quite innocently asked about what is the connection between Masonry and Knights Templar. And sad to say, nobody knew they could answer. So then I thought, okay, let me keep my mouth shut because I was new to this. And was quite embedded in my mind. It was intriguing me for a long time. And in the next few years, as I progressed and I finished my craft degrees and the Royal Arch and so on and so forth, I kept asking this question about what's the connection and that. And I asked this of several Masons, many of them senior Masons, distinguished Masons, and whom I still hold in high regard. And sad to say that I couldn't get a satisfactory answer. So I thought the best way then is to do my own study and research into that. And when I was doing that research, I came across all this other wonderful aspects of Masonry. So my drive to get into this was that I wanted to experience it personally. So it's not just enough to read about it, but to actually go through it. So you get a first-hand perspective what's happening. And that is what probably triggered my interest in all these beyond the craft degrees.
So this became sort of a hobby for you in a way for you to
it was certainly a hobby.
Deeper.
It was certainly a hobby, but it was also a huge opportunity as a learning experience for me, because as and when I went into something new, I discovered so much more, which I would never have known if I had not taken that step. And each particular order has intrinsic value. The value is in terms of the entire mosaic of Masonry. But more important, it has its own intrinsic worth in terms of its place in that mosaic, and its obviously its philosophy and esoteric teachings. And it also kind of gives you probably a wider and a deeper insight into the whole structure of Masonry. You get to meet lots of interesting people, and many of them have become very valued friends of mine over the last few years. And it opens up doors and avenues which you never thought possible. I've traveled quite a bit throughout the world, and invariably it has been with some Masonic connection, and it has enriched me immensely.
Wow, that's absolutely amazing. Since you've obviously so well traveled, you have been to, we should actually count it the reverse way around, the amount of places you've not been to, because you've been to almost everywhere, So with this extensive traveling that you've done, what stories have you found out? Do you have some amazing stories regarding some of these journeys that you could share with us?
Yeah, well, yeah, sure. You see, I was initiated in Srinivasa Gopala Lodge in '98. And then what happened was we were coming close to the year 2000. So that was the onset of a new millennia. And there was some discussion as how do we commemorate the onset of the new millennia. So the then regional Grand Master of Southern India, who later on went on to become Grand Master of India, most worshipful Arun Chintopant. And he suddenly came to one of our meetings and he said, why don't you start a lodge to commemorate this new millennia? And at that time, the regional Grand Director of Ceremonies, who later on became a regional Grand Master of Southern India, right was the G.K. Selvarajan. He suggested the name the Millennium Lodge. And the current regional Grand Master of Southern India, right was the B.G. Madhusudan, he said instead of calling it Lodge Millennium, to call it the Millennium Lodge, basically to emphasize the connect with the onset of the new millennium. And I was chosen as the organizing secretary of that lodge, and I was a founder senior warden. So I ended up becoming master of that lodge in 2001, which was 4 years earlier than what I became master at my mother lodge. As a consequence of my becoming a master of this lodge, when I think it was in 1 year later, when Right Vashwada, then Right Vashwada Arun Chintopant was elected as Grand Master of Grand Lodge of India. And he made me, appointed me to the new office of editor of a new Grand Lodge of India newsletter magazine called Glindia, GL India, Glindia. So that I was the founder editor for that for a couple of years. And then after he demitted office, it was discontinued. So that was when I was kind of recording the various events happening throughout India as far as Masonry was concerned. Then in that particular 1 year into his Grand Mastership, there was, sorry, before that I must step back a little bit. When he was to be elected as Grand Master was the year 2001, just soon after my installation. And outgoing Grand Master was most for the D.D. Udeshi. Now, what happened was, I don't know if you're aware of it, but there was discord between Grand Lodge of India and the three parent Grand Lodges going back to 2000, early 1990s. And this was over some rather unfortunate developments. So what happened was in the year 2001, it came the turn of Grand Lodge of India to host what was called the Conference of Masonic Grand Lodges of the world. And this comes once in every 18 months. So it was the first time India was given the privilege of hosting it, and it was to be held in New Delhi. And Moswashwada Udeshi was extremely keen that England, Ireland, and Scotland should also be invited for this particular conference, because after all, they're the parent Grand Lodges. So in order to do that, he had to move heaven and earth to re-establish amity with these three parent Grand Lodges. So I'm glad to inform that his efforts bore fruit, and amity was restored between the parent Grand Lodges and India, as a consequence of which representatives of those bodies came and attended this Grand Lodge World Conference in Delhi. And I was freshly minted Worshipful Master, about to demit office by that time. So most Worshipful Udeshi had also announced a new award scheme for lodges. It was called the Grand Master 7-Star Trophy. And they had several categories in which you had to excel in order for you to qualify for that trophy. So he announced that coincidentally when I was about to be installed as Master of Millennium Lodge. And I took that circular as sort of a guideline by which to act during my mastership, so that I could, have some goals set for it. And fortune favored me, and I was chosen as the first winner of this 7-Star Trophy for the Grand Master. So I was invited to attend this World Conference in order to receive that trophy. So it was quite an enormous experience and opportunity for me. So the World Conference was the first World Conference ever held in India, and I was a delegate for that. And they actually, the delegates were supposed to be grand officers, and I was far from being a grand officer at that time. So they made exceptions to the rule because they wanted to accommodate a few youngsters. So I was one of those fortunate guys who was allowed to become a delegate. So I attended that World Conference, and I found that quite fascinating. Of course, the subjects were quite detailed and all that, but what was more interesting was suddenly you got this vastly different approaches to Masonry. It was not the blinkered approach that we had been used to, at least I had been used to ever since I joined Masonry. So that was something that was quite amazing. And then the next day was the Grand Festival. So all these Grandmasters had visited, stayed extra a couple of days to attend the Grand Festival. And in that Grand Festival, the Grand Festival was in the evening. In the afternoon, just before that, was the election of the next Grandmaster. And that's when Right Worshipful Arun Chintopant was elected as the next Grandmaster. And in the evening was the Grand Festival where Moshe Udeshi presented that trophy to me. And after that, of course, 1 year later, Right Worshipful Arun Chintopant was installed Grandmaster, and he started this magazine, India, and appointed me as the editor. So as I said, this World Conference happens once in 18 months. So the next edition of the World Conference was announced in Delhi to be held 18 months later. And that was in the capital city of Santiago, the Republic of Chile in South America. Now, I've personally never traveled to South America. I never imagined that I would go to South America. But then when this was announced, I immediately spoke to Grandmaster Chintopant and said, "Sir, if you are going, I would like to come with you." And he said, "You're more than welcome." So we, the two of us, were the only people who went from India. And it was a tortuous journey. We had to, both of us met up in Bombay. And then from Bombay, we took a South African Airways flight to Johannesburg. The flight was about almost 7 hours. And then we were in that airport for about 4 hours transit. Then we took a Varig flight from Johannesburg to Sao Paulo in Brazil. That was 10-hour plus flight. And then we landed in Sao Paulo for about 5 hours. And then another Varig flight to Santiago, which was another 7-8 hours. So by the time we landed in Santiago, we were completely exhausted. And I don't know if those of you know Grandmaster Chintopant, he's a strict vegetarian. So unfortunately, when he booked his ticket, he had whoever booked his ticket had forgotten to inform the airline of his vegetarian requirements. So there was no vegetarian food available for him. The poor man almost starved those several hours. And we landed up in Chile at about 3 in the morning. And thank God that the hosts had assigned 2 Masons to receive us at the airport to look after us, English-speaking Masons. One was a slightly older gentleman who was assigned to look after Grandmaster Chintopant, and one was a young Mason who was hardly 21, 22. He was assigned to look after me. His name is Sergio Dunlop Elso. I still remember that. So it so happened that when we landed there, when the bags came out, my bag came out, but Grandmaster Chintopant's bag never came out. So that was another shock to the system. And then we finally went up, reached our hotel. It was almost 5:36 in the morning. So we quickly took a short nap and what about around 10 in the morning. And then we went down for breakfast. I must say this, it was, his bag was didn't reach, as I said, and it was the person who was assigned to help him out was a retired pilot of the LAN Chile, which is the national airline of Chile. So using his contacts, he was able to trace that the bag had somehow been left behind in Sao Paulo, and that it would reach, one evening later. That is by evening that day. So we went to the hotel and checked in. Grandmaster Arun had only his carry-on bag. So we took this short nap and then woke up in the morning and we went for the breakfast. And to his horror and my equal horror, the only items on the menu were strictly non-vegetarian. So there was nothing vegetarian for him except possibly toast, which he ate rather gingerly because afraid of what it had touched. So then we had programmed our visit to reach 1 day earlier, because primarily to get over the possible jet lag, which was quite required because of this intense travel. So that first day in Santiago, we had nothing to do except to just wander around and see the place. And so we were doing that. Then while wandering around the city, it was downtown Santiago, sitting on the pavement, we saw this very old lady, wrinkled face, full of character. And she was selling apples, absolutely lovely apples in front of her. And I think she must have been one of the local, backgrounds, like to put it crudely, an American Indian. There. So she had no word of English. I had no word of Spanish. And I had to bargain for the apples. And so finally, I didn't know what to do. I pulled out my wallet and I just opened it and said, take what you want. I want the apples. It was like, I said this and I said that. So she took a couple of notes and then she said, take the apples. So the apples was the cuisine for our grandmaster for that whole day. He survived on apples till his bag came in the evening. And when the bag was delivered in the hotel, he was very anxious to open it. And he told me he was worried because of two reasons. One was, it was this grand regalia was in that. Without that, he couldn't attend the meeting. It wouldn't be appropriate. The second more important thing was it carried these MTR pre-cooked meals, which you open this tin and take it out and shove it in hot water in its container, and it gets cooked, and you have this wonderful pongal, wonderful sambar sadam, and all those lovely things. So that was going to be his basic diet for the week we were going to spend there. So he was mortified and horrified if those things didn't arrive. What would he survive on? And so that was an interesting episode as far as I was concerned. And the hosts were wonderful. They looked after us very well. They took us around the city of Santiago and surrounding areas. The meetings were absolutely, lovely. We were taken to some of the best, choicest places, and they made sure that no menu was repeated for the lunch and dinner for those 4 or 5 days we were there. And then the final icing on the cake was when we had a gala dinner, the last dinner, and that was one in their grand palace there, and the president of the country and all were there. But one take back which I found very interesting, I never forgotten it, was there are two take backs in that. The first was when the opening ceremony was held. It was held in an indoor stadium. And the number of Masons who had attended that conference was about 100 plus. But the indoor stadium was filled with local Masons. And what's most intriguing was one entire section was full of young boys and girls. Now, I was puzzled as what the young boys and girls were doing in a Masonic conference. So I asked my, escort, this young person, Brother Sergio. I said, what are they doing out here? He said, then he told me, don't you know that they're all scouts, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts? And scouting was founded by Brother Baden Powell. And ever since then, scouting is part of Masonry. And as far as Chile is concerned, the Grand Lodge of Chile runs the scouting movement in Chile. And each lodge has Boy Scout and Girl Scout troops attached to it. And I said, what a wonderful idea. So that's something which was something I never even imagined it. So
you are a scout as well,
rather intriguing and rather interesting.
You are a scout as well, if I'm not. You are a scout as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
it's not in your bio, but you had mentioned it in one of your lectures.
Right, I'm a President Scout, yes. But that was before I knew anything about Masonry. So that was long, long ago. The other take back which I found
initiated beforehand, Yeah.
Yes, true. The other fascinating take back which I got from that trip was something which has remained in my mind even more etched, deeply etched. See, in our experience in Masonry under Grand Lodge of India, very early in the charge after initiation, we are told that to avoid all topics of religious and political discussion. And justly so, because they could be divisive. But what was astonishing for me was during one of the conference sessions, the Grand Master of Chile got onto the mic and excused himself. And he said, "Brother, please excuse me. I have to go on an urgent business for it will take about 2 hours. I'll finish that and come back." And then somebody asked him, "What is so urgent about it?" And he said, "There's a bill being debated in the parliament, and that bill is to legalize divorce." If you remember, Chile has been a deeply Catholic country. And years before that, it was Augusto Pinochet who had been ruling as a dictator. And he had come in by overthrowing Salvador Allende. Salvador Allende was a Mason, by the way. So there was this very orthodox kind of leadership and political situation prevailing at that point in time. And the idea of divorce being allowed was quite radical. But apparently the time had come when we were there for the bill to be debated, for it to be voted on in the parliament. And the Grand Master of Chile, he was going in his capacity as Grand Master of Chile, not as a private person. He was going there to talk in favor of the thing. And the reason for that, he said, was Masons stand for all that is good. Any oppression by anybody has to be opposed. So that was something which was astonishing for me. The very idea of a Mason expressing his himself as a Mason in a situation like that. So that made me even more interested in the idea of Masonry in other countries. So I realized quickly that the Masonic, the spread of Masonry was quite individualized when it came to various geographies and various histories and periods in time. And the Latin American and the European continental Masonry has much, much closer connection between Masonry and the politics and religion of its time. So this was something that was quite eye-opening for me. I remember this episode very clearly because it had a lasting impact on me. And then just
you
to tell
had
you another
mentioned this. You had mentioned this in one of your earlier lectures as well. Exactly this point. You have also mentioned that you have been to Rosslyn Chapel and a couple of other very, very, very amazing and prestigious places. I mean, I can't remember all of them because there's so many.
Yes, so in Scotland, in Scotland, I've been to Rosslyn a couple of times. And in fact, I will be talking about this in one of my lectures coming up on 15th of this month. I'm giving a lecture to a joint meeting of Lodge Susruta number 298 and Lodge Anant number 315, both of Cochin. So the topic for that is Rosslyn Chapel itself. I've been there about 3 times now. And it's a fascinating place. It's just about less than half an hour road journey from Edinburgh. And there's much controversy about it. One school of thought says it is Masonic, the other school vehemently denies it. And the jury is still out because no great amount of scientific research has been allowed to be done. Let me put it that way. Many people have talked about treasure being buried beneath it. And in fact, that Jan Da Vinci Code of Dan Brown touches upon that aspect of it. But the family Rosslyn, which still owns the chapel, by the way, has refused any permission for any such investigation. So, in fact, if you climb to the first level in the chapel and you look out through the window at one particular direction, the whole chapel is surrounded by a big forest. And just if you peep over the trees, little distance away, you see Rosslyn Castle, which is the family seat of the Sinclair family. And the Sinclair family have been the traditional Grand Masters of Grand Lodge of Scotland for a number of years until they voluntarily gave it up, some about 100 plus years ago. So they gave up that privilege. Otherwise, even today, the Grand Master would have been from that family. So anyway, that's there's another one interesting place in Scotland called the Kilwinning Lodge. It's called Mother Lodge Kilwinning. And it's assigned a number 0. It's the only lodge in the world with a number 0. There's another very interesting story. See, each time I go to some place, I don't go alone. I normally take along a bunch of brethren. So, and this time when we wanted to go to Kilwinning, I wrote to the master and secretary of the lodge saying that, introducing myself and saying, I'd like to come and visit your place. Would it be in order for us to do so? So when I went with another, about what we were, I think 10 of us. And we went and visited the place. The master and secretary both were there to welcome us and then give us a guided tour of the place. And they were very warm and forthcoming. And it was a glorious past, glorious history. I spoke about it briefly in couple of my weekly Masonic audio talks. So it's a place worth visiting, but tremendous history. And its history is interwoven not only with Masonic history, but also the history of Scotland itself. So it's quite an interesting place. And there's another lodge there called Canongate Kilwinning. The name is sometimes misleading, but there are two different lodges. Canongate Kilwinning has a chapter attached to it. And that is the chapter room at the Supreme Grand Royal Arch Chapter of Scotland headquarter building in Edinburgh. And in the chapter room, there's actually a crypt. So the candidate is lowered into the crypt. So the crypt, if you go inside the crypt, you'll see that, of course, there's a traditional altar, all that stuff is there. But what is more interesting is what's on the walls of the crypt. You see the murals on the walls. It's all in an Egyptian style, what you would probably see in a pyramid. And there's clear references to the biblical story of Moses and the Exodus. And that's part of that walls. And I mean, I don't want to say something more because I will be revealing something I may not be proper to reveal at this point in time. But it's a very interesting place one can visit. And I knew the Grand Scribe who just retired, but his successor I've not met as yet. But the previous one was the most hospitable person you can imagine. There are lots of such interesting places, brother, where you can go. And believe me, my experience, wherever I've gone, has been most enjoyable. The brethren there have been most hospitable.
Even when you had
quite forthcoming.
Even there was Stonehenge, if I'm not mistaken. And have you ever been to any of the summer solstice times over there?
I've been to Stonehenge. I've been to Stonehenge itself. Yeah. I went to Stonehenge, but this was, oh boy, maybe early 2000s. And it's a very, again, the story of Stonehenge has many, many angles to it. One, of course, some believe it was made by the Druids. Others, it was some kind of an astronomical solar clock. Others believe it to be some kind of a portal to another dimension. So these are all stories one associates with Stonehenge. And there are lots of these. Stonehenge is not the only, what should I say, monument of that period. There are others which you see, especially if you go into the islands in the north of Scotland, on the Orkneys and the Shetlands. There are lots of these things there. That's what I normally do is whenever I go to Scotland, I make it a point to visit at least one set of these islands. So we have been to Isle of Islay, Mull, Orkney, Skye, all wonderful places to go to. And it's interesting when you go there and you actually run into Masonic connections. And,
you must have learned so much from these locations certainly. And studying them.
Absolutely. And even in a place very close by a place like Mauritius, I had the privilege of accompanying the then Grandmaster, most worshipful brother, Captain Dr. Balaram Vishwakumar, for a meeting in Mauritius. And Mauritius had just become its own independent sovereign Grand Lodge a few years earlier. It was consecrated by, I think it was most worshipful Arun Chintopan who consecrated Grand Lodge of Mauritius. Either it was him or it was his successor, most worshipful Justice Devendra Gupta. I don't remember at this point in time, but one of them, in fact, consecrated that Grand Lodge. And the Primus Grand Master was a person called most worshipful Lindsay Discombe, one of the finest gentlemen you would have ever come across. sadly passed on. So when we went there a few years later, when Dr. Vishwakumar was the Grand Master, they were having some kind of a conference there. It was an African conference, and there was also their own meetings. At that time, I was the worshipful master of Madras Masters Lodge, which is the lodge for installed masters, the oldest such installed master lodge, number 103. So we were invited by a lodge they call Lodge Unity to come and visit them. And see, the Lodge Unity was a very unique lodge in Mauritius. They followed the rectified Scottish Rite, not what we do. Ours is a modified emulation. So theirs was the rectified Scottish Rite. And their ceremonies are quite different from what we do. So we were invited to attend one of their initiation ceremonies. And I thought it only fit that we should in turn invite them to attend one of our meetings. So we gave them two options. We said, if you like, we would come and demonstrate to you a third degree ceremony as per GLIs. Alternatively, we'll invite you to attend a lodge meeting of Madras Masters Lodge in Chennai, where you could demonstrate your rectified Scottish degrees, first degree. So they said, we'll do both. So they invited us to demonstrate the third degree in Mauritius. And about 9 months later, they came and demonstrated their rectified Scottish Rite in Madras Masters Lodge when I was in the Master's chair. So what is interesting is when you see that ceremony, it is so much more impactful than you can ever imagine. The candidate for initiation is asked to report possibly 2 hours before scheduled time of start. Just trying to tell you that how serious it is. It is not something which you're going to experience at all in a normal Masonic experience. It's not something where you walk in 5 minutes later and just get in and get initiated. No, you have to prepare your mind and your thought process for that, and there's a procedure for that. It's quite intense. So it's very, very enlightening for somebody who has never experienced that to go and see something like that. I encourage people to go there and see it. But unfortunately, I believe now Lodge Unity has ceased functioning for whatever reason. I don't know why, but if you ever get an opportunity to witness a rectified Scottish Rite, please do so. Your eyes will be opened up. It's absolutely amazing.
Personally, Brother Bharat, as a Freemason and an individual, with this journey you've taken, how has this journey in a way made you a better man physically, spiritually? Just as you spoke about this this ritual and this procedure, how do you feel that it's changed you? In what way?
For one thing, it has opened up my mind, Brother Richard. What I perceived to be Masonry in my first few years, that perception has been shattered, and shattered in a welcome manner. Not that, and I regret it. It has expanded my understanding of Masonry. It has made me more open to the idea that Masonry is not something which could be pigeonholed, and it is much more than what we have ever imagined. As far as that has made me a better man, well, that's for others to decide, but I don't want to get into that. But I'm certainly much happier now than I was when I was in my beginning of my Masonic journey. I believe I've learned something. And I believe that I should, if possible, help others along that journey. So it has been my philosophy that wherever I went, as I said, I always took along others to share the journey. And if possible, I brought back these orders to India to give others an opportunity to enjoy the same.
Thank you so much, Right Worshipful Brother Bharat Epur, for this amazing, in-depth, on-the-level platform where we could actually delve into your psyche and extract these wonderful stories and events that you have experienced, sharing them with other viewers and people of the world. So thank you so much for your time and everything.
Thank you, Brother Richard. Thank you, Brother and all. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity. I wish you well. Stay safe. God bless you all.
So please feel free to give us your feedback in the comments below. And a hearty thanks to all the brethren and visitors who joined us on today's episode. We hope that you found something special and informative. We look forward to interacting with you on our social media channel and can express your opinions in the comments below. Views or even post queries about anything to do with Freemasonry, the links in the description below. So join us on the next time for an all new episode. Until then, please hit the subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. Also press the bell icon and show us how you feel, and if you want to give us any in-depth views or have any questions, please by all means just, give us a written comment below. We'll try to get back to you regarding that. So join us at the same Masonic time and the same Masonic place. This is the Quarry Side Chat team, and we wish you a magical week ahead. Until we meet again, let us now part on the square. Goodbye.